What is going on, guys? Joey here, and today I just wanted to talk to you guys about spot training. People tend to focus on the slowest point of their lift, and I wanted to provide some of the ideas or thoughts that have helped me through the last decade getting through these scenarios really quickly. I know that a lot of you guys are asking about the future. What's next, what's happening after nationals, things like that. And I will talk about that a little bit in my next video, but this topic was just on my mind, and while the idea is fresh, I just want to get it out to you guys. So, spot training, what are we talking about? You're benching, and about halfway through the lift or towards lockout or maybe off the chest, you notice that your lift is very slow. Or deadlifting, you take forever to break the bar off the ground. Squatting, you have like a weird sticking point out the hole, whatever, right? That's the spot that we're speaking of. In the past, in the olden days, 10, 20 years ago, you would see, if you have a bad lockout, you'd see guys doing like bench press with chains or close grip or bands and things like that. Why would they do these things? Well, if you think about it, the closer you get to the top of a lift with a band or a chain, it's going to get heavier. So the part of the lift that is more difficult for you becomes like super difficult. And I mean, I don't really feel the need to break those things down and talk about why I don't really like them. Because I mean, nobody's really doing them these days. And that just goes to show how things have changed over the years. I could not tell you the last time I saw somebody using bands on any type of lift. Sure, there's people that still do it. I just don't see it ever. If I had to guess, more people are going to be using some sort of RPE, some kind of straight weights, things like that. So when people ask questions about, hey, how do I get through this point in the lift? I would just say things like, let me kind of explain why you're slow at that point. And I think it just comes down to your limb lengths and your leverages. Leverages are pretty much just your limb. Your limb length is a part of it. And then the space between the joints, that's going to determine what your leverage is like. So for example, if you have a guy who's like really short and he has like a lot of muscle and even some body fat, that's going to fill out all the space between his joints, and it's going to allow him to really coil up and just build up a ton of resistance when he's in, the bottom position of a bench or a squat or something like that, even in the bottom position of a deadlift. If you're super tall and lanky, you're going to have less of that going on, so you're going to have to work a little bit harder, maybe a lot harder oftentimes, and that can make a huge difference in, how well you're going to be able to perform doing a lift. And what people tend to do is, like I said, they'll look at the portion of the lift and say, wow, I'm really slow here. How do I fix it? I was going to give I can give a couple examples of like how people used to think, and then I'll tell you guys towards the end, like what I think the solution is. So let's say you're slow from the ground, right? You would have people do deficit deadlifts, for example. I don't like deficit deadlifts because you're starting the deadlift in a position that you're never, ever going to start at in a meet, because you're going to start higher than that. So you're going to be passing through the point that needs help with momentum already. You're also increasing your range of motion on a deadlift, which can be like risky for your health. Like obviously, especially if you pull conventional, even sumo, you can screw yourself up. And also I believe that some people have leverage that is so poor in these positions that even pulling the comp lift would put them at a similar risk to somebody who maybe they had pretty good leverage, but then they were doing a deficit deadlift or something like that. And that is something to think about. And I don't think people just think like everybody's pulling from the floor the same. No, it's like very different. Because we're all built different. Built different. Anyway. What I would say to someone that was like really worried about their floor speed on a deadlift is just do more deadlifts from the ground. A lot of the things that I preach and give to my lifters, and that we try to, even the flex coaches, what we try to do is everything is sort of founded in the principles of bodybuilding. And yes, more range of motion is one of those principles. You want full range of motion. You want to keep tension, on the muscle, but we also have to pay attention to specificity. And I just think that pulling from the ground should be sufficient enough, unless you're somebody that has like in an off season, if you have like crazy good leverage on a deadlift, I don't see a massive issue with you like wearing shoes that aren't like perfectly optimal. It's like not the end of the world, right? But like definitely in a meet prep, you want to be as low to the ground as possible. And you want to be practicing the lift the way that you're going to do it in a meet. And there's usually, because that's the skill that we're trying to build up, right? And your sticking point is always, it's always going to be kind of your sticking point, but the weights can increase. Does that make sense? So let's say, your max is like 500 pounds on deadlift and you have really poor floor speed. It could still be like that. It's still going to be slow from the ground, which means you're going to have to get tight earlier on. I mean, you should be tight regardless, but there's, some lifters, they sit there and they're pulling, and then the bar breaks the ground and then it's easy, right? Their fight is coming a little bit easier as opposed to other lifters where their fight is coming a little bit later. And that's really it. So you can still have that same sticking point because it's based on your leverages, right? Like how you're built, some things that are already predetermined. But that doesn't mean... also your stance and your grip. If you change your stance, you're going to obviously change where that sticking point is, but that's another video. Actually, you could play into this video too. If your floor speed is like so bad, it's possible, and this is why it's important to keep an open mind, that maybe you might want to adjust your footing to see if you can maybe get that sticking point a little bit higher, because maybe mentally it's just easier for you. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, you just got to try it and assume that we're speaking from like you found your optimal is such a revolving door. It can change. It's not always the same thing. But for example, if you're going up a couple weight classes, your optimal is going to be very different versus when you were smaller. But yeah, when you're pulling from the ground, for example, I say just keep pulling from the ground. If it's a big deal, you can change your footing a little bit. Now, if you want to get some deficit deadlifts in to work some like hypertrophy, and you could do it really, really safe, I'm not even an advocate for that movement. I'm just saying, let's just say like a close grip bench. There you go, much safer movement. Sure, no problem. I think the bench press, if we're using the bench press, for example, if you're using a bench press, for example, you definitely want to bench with all different types of grips, right? Close grip, a wider grip, dumbbells, incline, whatever, because we want to build as much muscle as possible. When you're dealing with the shoulders can push like omnidirectional, right? Like they can push everywhere. Versus like your glutes are a little bit more limited than the shoulders. And your hips as well. So obviously you're just going to go up and down, right? You don't have, and obviously when we're benching, when you think about the bench press, it is a kind of weird lift because you're not just going straight up and down. You're just like pressing kind of like a J. The bar tends to sit somewhere between your elbow and your shoulder if you're looking at a side profile, and then you're kind of pressing that up towards lockout, and it might be a little bit closer towards your shoulder versus your elbow on the bottom. But I hope that I'm making sense. You want to, it doesn't really matter where your sticking point is. If you're training the competition lift and you're building the muscles associated with that lift, you are solving like most of your problems. Literally, most of your problems are going to be solved just by doing that. It's a lot more simple than people, want to make it out to be. I could make this very complicated. I was very wordy, okay? I'm just trying to make conversation, all right? I don't know if a conversation means back and forth. You guys get what I'm saying. I'm just talking to you guys, putting some ideas in your head, giving you guys things to think about. But literally for spot training, you know, I don't really like adding too much. I don't mind pause work, pause deadlifts. Obviously, we pause bench, tempo squats to help with positioning, but you don't really need to go super crazy with it. And I think if you are doing the lifts in a way that's safe and you are doing them, you know, frequently enough, and you are recognizing when you're beat and you're deloading or pulling back a little bit so fatigue can go down, and then you're reapplying that stress, and then, you know, you compete, and then you say, okay, I need to work on my tightness on squat, my pauses on bench suck, and like my grip on deadlift is not good, or my lockout's like weird. Maybe you change your stance a little bit on deadlift and you just make some little adjustments here and there, and then you add some pause work and some tempos, and you just fix everything, right? And then you can use your meet to kind of really tell you, you know, what really needs to be worked on, because that's when you're going like super, super heavy. That's also why I like high reps on certain things, because you're going to get form breakdown without having to go crazy heavy. But yeah, I think I've given you guys quite a bit in this video. The takeaway from the video is, instead of focusing on a partial movement like a band or a chain or a pin squat or something like that, where you're only working on a portion of a lift or a block pull, I would say just work the entire movement, because you want most of your recovery to go there. And I think that that's going to yield to faster progress. And I think that, I mean, me personally, when I would do things like block pulls in the past, like literally over like 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, just to try it out, I would get a lot of stress in areas that like I wouldn't really feel pain, because I'm initiating the lift from a strange place. Like, it's just not a place where I'm going to ever be pulling in a meet. Does that make sense? So anyway, if you guys were able to take something away from this video, this particular sort of viewpoint on dealing with sticking points, let me know in the comments down below. If you're an OG and you've heard my video from many moons ago where I talked about this, let me know. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.